I'll start with a quick anecdote. It was 1970, a long time ago, before most of you were born, 1978. James Emshoff, who I worked with at Wharton, and I had written a paper called Stakeholder Management. It was our sort of first paper trying to take the idea, which we didn't invent, but turn it into a kind of approach to thinking about management and decision making, rather than an approach for organizing information, which others had done. We sent it to a journal to be listed as a working paper, not to be published, just to list it. This journal listed working papers. I'm not sure which one it was. I think it was Sloan Management Review or something. The editor calls and says, "No problem, we'll list your paper, but there is a typo in the title. It says stakeholder management. We know you mean stockholder, or is it shareholder? Which one? So we can change it." I said, "Please don't." The way I see stakeholder theory is it's about trying to find a solution to the problem of how are we going to understand business in the 21st century? How can we have an idea about business that offers us hope, that tries to make business better? I really think we can be the generation that makes business better. But we can only do that if we tell a new narrative, a new story about what's possible for business. And I think that story goes roughly like this. Every business always has and always will create and sometimes destroy value for customers, suppliers, employees, communities, and people with the money, financiers, bondholders, shareholders. And the interests of these groups go in the same direction. Yes, there's some conflict, but we need to figure out how to get them going in the same direction. What's good for customers needs to be good for suppliers. What's good for shareholders needs to be good for communities. I think we have, in part, the global financial crisis because we forgot about that. We looked at either shareholders only, or what's good for governments only, or what's good for consumers only. There's a jointness to these interests. If we're going to have business in the 21st century, if we're going to make business better, if we're going to raise the level of people in societies, then we need something like stakeholder theory. It's a revolution, but it's a revolution in ideas. We need a new story before we can figure out how to enact that story.
Ed Freeman is actually a very famous man, very famous thinker in business school world. Just to replace and to situate him, actually until he came up with the notion or the term stakeholder theory in the late 70s and then a bit more specifically in the 80s, the dominant vision, or the dominant, we'll call it, paradigm within business school in general, but particularly in the United States, was that actually a firm belonged to its shareholders only and was supposed to actually do everything it could to maximize the shareholder benefits and particularly the profits that was going back to those shareholders. So he came up with this notion, which actually was not something new in itself, because obviously firms for many, many years had been stakeholder-oriented in the sense that they've had to look at a broader environment around them, which were including naturally the shareholders, the people who were investing in the company, but also the employees, the managers, states, communities, different groups that were having an impact on the firm and on which the firm was having an impact. But he came up with a very powerful word, and a word that was in a sense kind of reflecting and distancing itself from the shareholder. So as a consequence, his work has had a huge influence on our thinking about the firm in a different way and are rethinking the firm as an entity that is set within business and society context. And as you know, ESSEC is a school that really wants to focus on those issues, wants to actually develop research and practice actually around a perspective on the firm that would be a bit larger than just simply a tool to serve the interests of the shareholder. So having him accept our invitation and spend quite a bit number of days with us was indeed very important, because he's been really shaping that field to a significant extent. His work has been constantly cited by people working on corporate social responsibility, people working on corporate citizenship, global governance, etc. All those issues that we are now working on at ESSEC.
As the father of stakeholder theory, it was really great for us to have an opportunity to interact with him. What I found really inspiring in him coming with us was that not only was he able to interact with our PhD students, but also with practitioners in the real world, where he was able to share his insights. And I think what the great value of his presence with us was that he really remembered us the powerfulness of stakeholder theory, not viewing it as a way or as an approach to protect, for companies to protect themselves, or to use stakeholder theory in a defensive way, where they think about, okay, dealing with stakeholders only in a way to avoid conflicts, to avoid problematic legislations, or to avoid crisis situations. What the message that he really powerfully conveyed with us was that stakeholder theory was about thinking about generating values in new ways, and in really building upon the interdependencies of the relationships with these various stakeholders, and help companies think about how they can generate values from working with all these stakeholders, rather than thinking about how to avoid destroying values.
Ed Freeman told us when he came to ESSEC that the key problem and one of the key issues that can help us understand the crisis, help us understand a lot of the problems, is actually the paradigm that is set behind business practice and business theory today. And this paradigm is indeed that the firm belongs to its shareholder only. And he's been very clear about that in all our conversations, in all his presentations, and he's really set in terms of his own personal intellectual project to try and actually deconstruct that paradigm, but also try to propose an alternative to that paradigm on the basis of stakeholder theory, on the basis of a much more inclusive understanding of the firm and of its role within society, and its role on society, and the role of society on the firm. And in that context, it's true that stakeholder theory can definitely be one way through which we can deconstruct this paradigm of shareholder theory, which is indeed, I agree with Ed Freeman, very much at the root of a lot of our problems today.
Entrepreneurs, they create new organizations, they create new business models, and they're in this great position to build these new business models, taking stakeholders into account, taking society into account, viewing a company not only as a way, to generate profits for shareholders, but really to generate, shared value more broadly. And it's easier to introduce these ideas when a new corporation is created, as compared to changing things in a really well-established organizations where cognitive processes make it difficult to change things. So yes, entrepreneurship has a specific role to play. I would argue that social entrepreneurship or social businesses, new organizations that embrace not only a commercial goal but also a social goal, play in that regard a very specific role, because they're really their engine, their motivation, their raison d'être is really to both generate economic and social value. And to that extent, they have no solution but to really work very closely with this wide range of stakeholders.
The key issue in the coming years and coming months will be to come up with an alternative to the shareholder mantra, or the shareholder paradigm. And indeed, stakeholder theory is a way to go, as I just said before, but at the same time, a big question I'm having personally, and I think some of us are having, is whether or not you can do this questioning from within the business school, because within the business school context, the shareholder paradigm is still very powerful. It's still inscribed in the way in which we teach our students. It's still very strongly inscribed in the way in which we publish, in the types of journals, publication that we produce. So in order to actually move away from that paradigm, we need probably intellectual diversity. And we need ideas that would come from anthropology, we need ideas that would come from geography, from sociology, from political science. And business schools in that context are not maybe the best actors to actually nurture this type of collective rethinking of the way in which we understand the company and its role in society. I'm thinking increasingly that we need a seriously transdisciplinary setting to do that. And business schools, except if they are starting to work much more closely with other departments within universities or other schools of governance, political science schools, etc., are going to be, I think, not necessarily the best place to do that type of intellectual rethinking.
I'm convinced of the responsibility of business schools in, really teaching future business leaders about their role in taking all these interdependencies into account. So business schools definitely have an important role to play in educating today's students and tomorrow future leaders to really view their role in society as building these bridges between corporations and society, building these bridges between NGOs and corporations, between governments and corporations, between the natural environment and corporations. And business schools cannot let other actors take this important issue or embrace this important issue without themselves playing a role in really making students aware of these important issues and helping them understand how they can really take stakeholder demands into account, address them, and again address them not only in a way that can be, can help companies avoid crises or difficult situations, but really build new business models where these stakeholders' demand will be taken into account to generate more value overall for society. So a revolution, I'm not sure, but a responsibility certainly. We've played a role, and we've been particularly innovative in introducing social entrepreneurship, social responsibility into the general curriculum. It's never enough, so we can do more. I think what's important now, we've built that expertise in social innovation, social entrepreneurship. I think what's important now is to take this to a higher stage and introduce this notion of stakeholder management into the mainstream management curriculum.